Now, at some point, though, you're going to deal with a search committee of a more significant place. I want to talk to you about that process. A few things you need to know about search committees. And the number one thing you need to know about search committees is that they all do a bad job of it. Don't let that bother you, because they're not pros, right? If they're pros at being a search committee, that's not a good thing, because they've done it a lot. If they've done it too much, if they're too good at it, you won't be there long. So most search committees are doing the best they know, but remember, this is what they're doing on top of everything else. They all have jobs, and they're trying to represent the constituency of the church. They've all got their own ideas about what needs to happen. They've got their own view of what has happened in the past. And you need to do all that you can to make the process easy on them, but don't expect that they're going to be doing everything they can to make it easy on you, because they just don't know what it's like to be in your position. Remember, you are the professional. They're all amateurs at this. So you ought to know more what's going on than they do. And if you don't, that's a problem. So when you deal with a committee, be prepared for a few things. I'll tell you the typical things they do badly. One is they don't know how to weed down their candidates. So they're looking at a stack of resumes. Let's say typical church in Kentucky is going to put an ad in the Western Recorder. They're going to get about 150 resumes. And they might weed out those resumes based on what kind of paper you printed on. I mean, there's no knowing why they do what they do early on. Furthermore, once they start dealing with candidates, they're not going to necessarily tell you how many candidates they're dealing with. They're not going to tell you exactly where they are in the process. They're not going to say anything to really offend you, but they're also not going to tell you how you compare to other guys necessarily. So they're just not always going to do it well. But typically what happens, first of all, is that you're going to get an opportunity to submit a resume. So step number one here for you is you need to put together a good resume. And there's an art to a resume. There's all kinds of websites that can help you do it. But from a pastor's perspective, somebody who looks at resumes, I've got guys sitting in this room right now who I first met on a resume. And what you want to do is you want to get this balance between not putting down too much on a resume, but putting down enough. Now that's easier said than done. But I'll tell you this, if I get a resume from a guy that's 15 pages long and it's got his whole doctrinal statement on there, that guy, he just gets discarded right off the bat. You think I'm going to read that long doctrinal statement? I'm not. And there's a lot of reasons why I would do that. First of all, this tells me this guy, he'll wear me out. He'll wear me out. I won't have time for this guy. He's wanting to say this much. His first foot in the door with me, he will not fit on my staff. He might be a great guy, but he doesn't fit with me. So I can just tell that by him having so much detail on his resume. The other thing is, the more detail you give, I mean, to me, it's like going out on a date with a girl and asking her about how her kidneys function or something. It's just like, hey, that's too much detail. We're not there yet. I don't need to know whether or not you're an infralapsarian, and the fact that you think you need to tell me that means you don't fit here. I don't want you at Buck Run. But I do want to know that the guy is doctrinally sound. I'm going to tell you, for the Southern Baptists, the easiest thing to do, if it's true, is to say, I agree completely with the Baptist Faith and Message 2000. And I am willing to discuss any particular matters of doctrine upon request. Oh, now I like that guy. I like him. He's told me a lot with that sentence. He's told me, okay, he's within our doctrinal framework. Baptist Faith and Message 2000 is a wonderful doctrinal statement. And the fact that he's within it, I'm comfortable with that. And he's not hiding from anything. He's willing to talk about it. If I want to talk about a particular doctrine, he says right there, he's willing to talk about it. So I like this statement, and I think that's what you should say. I am more interested in two things. One is I want to know something about his ministry objective, and I want to know his work history. So if on that resume you tell me your ministry objective, what you're looking to do, what you hope to do in the church. So if you tell me your ultimate goal is to be a pastor, but you are open to serving as an associate pastor, evangelism director, I mean, any number of things that serve the local church, I'm okay with that. Because most of the guys that come to work with us don't come to stay. They stay a good time. We've got a good track record of guys staying with us a long time, but they're ultimately going to do something else. They're going to go to some other position. And so he who desires the office of a pastor desires a good thing. The Bible says that. So I have no problem with the guy saying that that's his ultimate goal, but along the way, he'd really like to come alongside, work for somebody else while he's learning from them. That's a good thing. So your ministry objective, learn to write that well. Use dynamic verbs. Tell me you've got a proven track record. I like that phrase. Things like that. So just there are plenty of websites out there and software and all kinds of things that will help you write a good resume. But now your work history, I really look at this, and I'll tell you what I look for. First of all, I always look at whether or not this guy is a worker. So sometimes guys ask me, should I put down there that I worked at Walmart or that I, laid bricks one summer or something? Absolutely you should. If you leave that blank, I'm looking at your work, the timeline, and if I'm seeing 2 years there you didn't work, I'm wondering, well, how did he live? What did he do? I don't know. So if you worked at Walmart or whatever, I like to know it. I like to see a track record of a guy working. And furthermore, I especially look and see what you were doing in your local church when nobody was paying you to do it. So Scott Reeson is here. I use Scott as an example because Scott applied. So our student pastor, guys come to Buck Run, they tend to work up. We hire them in at one level, and they tend to work up into other positions. So Zach Thurman came in as an intern, became our middle school pastor, became our student pastor, became my exec pastor. Every time he moved up, he hired somebody to come behind him. So when he became exec, he hired Scott. I let him do the search. You find who you think the guy is, and then I want to interview him too at the end. And so he brings me Scott's resume, and I look at it, and I see Scott working secular work, but while he's doing that, and while he's a student, he's also plugged in and serving at 9th and O. He's got on there what he's doing at 9th and O. So Bill Cook, whose office was across the hall and 2 doors down from mine, I just got up and walked over. Hey, tell me about this guy. Oh, this guy's wonderful. You pay him anything? No, it's not a salaried position. He's done this faithfully. Oh, now, you really got me all right there. When I hear that a guy's doing a good job, when you're not paying him to do it, I'm confident he's going to do a good job when I am paying him to do it. Right? So this is why I tell seminary students, it's so important for you to plug in and to serve in a local church, even if they're not paying you. You ought to go to local pastors and say, hey, you got anything for me to do? first of all, if you go there and you do something that they're not paying you to do, but you make yourself indispensable, they'll find a way to pay you. If they can afford it, they'll pay you. But even if they don't, now you've established a track record. You're not doing this for the dollar, you're doing this for ministry. Somebody else will pay you eventually to do it because you've proven yourself there. So I look for this on a resume. I want to see the guy's history, his work history. I want to see his ministry objective. I want to know in general detail he's within the Baptist Faith and Message 2000. Now, I happen to be a Calvinist. I affirm all 5 points of classical Calvinism. You know how much that gets discussed when we hire somebody? I don't know that I discussed it with any of you. It's just, at Buck Run, it's not a thing. We're not trying to be the Reformed church or the Calvinist church. We're trying to be a biblical church. Jeff Pennington, who now pastors First Baptist Smyrna in Smyrna, Georgia, was my executive pastor. I think he was a three-pointer on a good day. You know what? It was never an issue because, first of all, he was submissive to my leadership, and I don't have a problem with somebody believing something differently than I do on one of those tertiary things. There's a difference in somebody teaching differently than me and someone teaching against me. So if Pennington had been teaching a class on John 17 and he says, now, I see this differently than the pastor does. I sort of think it means this. Dr. York thinks it means this. And he represents me well and without any kind of edge to it. I'm okay with that. That's good for my people to know that good Christian brothers see this differently. That's a healthy thing. Doesn't trouble me at all. So that's why I say Baptist Faith and Message 2000. I can live with anybody's doctrine if they're truly within the Baptist Faith and Message 2000. They don't have to be a 5-point Calvinist like I am. They need to respect my position. If there were somebody that is troubled by that, they wouldn't fit. And if there's somebody that feels they need to teach against me, they wouldn't fit. But you know what? I trust the power of the Holy Spirit and the Word. And so that's never been a problem. That's why I say I don't think you need to go into every point of doctrine. And I think you need to have room in your church or on your staff for people that don't see it exactly like you do. I think that's a good and healthy thing for our churches to see and to experience. So when a search committee asks you for your resume, you need to do something that's going to get your resume to the top of the pile. I think there are a few things to do. One is a picture of your family. Then, especially if your wife is better looking than you are, put her on there. And I can look around this room, I can see that would be the case for most of them. Right? So I always wanted Tanya's picture on there. I mean, I just always knew that people looked at it and said, well, if he's sharp enough to get her, he's sharper than he looks. So, I was proud of my family. I wanted them to see us as a family. I tried to get references that were, if they're recognizable names, that's okay. That's a good thing. But it's better that they really, truly, genuinely know me and can fight for me. So, I had Adrian Rogers as a reference on my resume, but Adrian genuinely knew me. And if you called Adrian Rogers, he was going to say, oh, I know Herschel, and Herschel's this and that. And I didn't put him on there just because he was Adrian Rogers, but because he also knew me. I've had guys put me on their resumes, A, without telling me, and B, without me really knowing them. And it's embarrassing when a committee calls and I say, I'm sorry, I can't really help you with this guy. I can tell you I had him in a classroom, and you know what? He never disrupted my class. That's the most I can tell. I can affirm that he was in my class and was a gracious student. Well, they need more. They need to know more than that. So don't put somebody on there who really can't defend you and fight for you. But references, your picture, if you've got links to you preaching or doing something, if it's good, put it on there. Now, you don't, some guys don't help themselves by putting that on there. But this is where I would make sure that I did something well and then gave them a link to it or access to it some way where they could see. And you want them to get comfortable with you. So anything you can do to get that moved to the top of the pile, because if they get 150 resumes, they're going to whittle it down to, say, 10. That means there are about 140 guys that aren't even really going to get a very close look. So this is why I think you need to submit both paper resume and electronic resume so they can get both. And if you can get somebody else to submit it for you with their cover letter, you're better off. So if a church asks you to send in your resume, you know, they put an ad in the Western Recorder, send resumes. That's okay. They've asked for that. It's still better if you get someone else to submit it for you. It just looks better. It feels better coming from a third party. If you can't get anybody to say, hey, I can vouch that this guy is worthy of your consideration, that's a little troublesome. At least it plants a question. If you can get somebody to submit your resume and say, hey, I can't tell you that this is God's man, but I can tell you this is the kind of man you need to look for. Oh, that's a nice line. And that will catch their attention. So to have a third party submit it on your behalf with a cover letter telling them you're worthy of their consideration, I think that gets you to the top of the pile. And I think it's better.